Hello, welcome back to Cog Extra. My name is Eleanor O'Keefe. I'm the editorial director of CogX, and I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming you to this virtual platform from wherever you are in the world, and also to be introducing this next session. This week, we're focusing on Createch, where technology and creativity come together. And this next section is addressing the absolute most vital question for our large landmark organizations. It's called Revenue and Resilience, Harnessing Digital Business Models in the Cultural Sector. And it's been put together by the extraordinary Boster Group. So the Boster Group is one of the world's leading independent consultancies. They build partnerships between global companies, arts institutions, and social impact foundations. They've overseen the transfer of over $75 million to national cultural and social impact partners. And they play an absolutely vital role in ensuring that arts organizations survive and thrive. Before I hand over to the extraordinary Susan Boster, let me just remind you that you can send questions for speakers on the CogX platform. And it's also there that you can visit our expo and meet some of the organizations that have been involved with CogX over the last few months. You can also connect with your fellow attendees in the audience. So although you see me on screen, do be aware that there are many watching from around the world and you can connect with them. It is, as we all know, time to embrace all things tech. So do give it a go and get networking and exploring. So it's time to bring on the wonderful Susan Boster, who will introduce you to our panel of amazing people that she has brought from all over the world. Susan, thank you so much for doing this. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And we are as big fans of yours as you seem to be of CogX. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And good morning, everyone. Huge welcome to this very, very special panel, which we're delighted to deliver today for the Cog Extra event in collaboration with the brilliant CogX team. We have been partnered with CogX for years, and I do remember the first moment I met Tabs Goldstaub on a bit of we were on poofs inside the Female Quotients Lounge at the World Economic Forum, and it was instant friendship, and we're thrilled, again, to be here today. And I'm really happy to be introducing you to some amazing panelists who are going to join me today to delve into the cultural sector's move to digital business models and what the future might have in store. But first, I wanted to give a very special thank you. We've already been introduced as Boster Group. Maggie, Georgina, Alex, thank you guys, because you guys have helped behind the scenes, and you're behind the scenes right now to make all this happen. The past decade has seen rapidly changing patterns in culture and creative industries' use of digital for income generation. At one end of the scale, digital platforms are providing small-scale creators with a wealth of new opportunities to embark on creative careers. YouTube, Instagram, Etsy, the Dots, all platforms which are empowering creatives to monetize their work and collaborate on bigger projects. At the other end, large arts institutions are partnering with tech companies to engage with new audiences and adapt to new means of digital engagement and consumption. Whether those are digital seats in theaters or exhibitions you can explore from your own sofa. Digital technology has the power to diversify both revenue sources and audiences. So this shift is being enabled by technological improvements and increased accessibility to digital tools and resources. But it also requires three things. One, innovative thinking from cultural institutions and the decision makers at the board and executive levels. Two, corporate social investment and targeted private financial investment to turn ideas into reality. And when I say corporate social investment, I'm also speaking to some of our great philanthropists out there. If you guys haven't seen it, there was an article one of our panelists brought to my attention yesterday in the FT talking about some of our greatest philanthropists from Lloyd Dorfman through to John Stadinsky. A lot of these folks are doing it too through their private work as philanthropists, in addition to the corporations. And 3, government support and forward-thinking policies to enable both institutions and individuals to make the most of new technology. For some of you who tuned in earlier, you would have heard from Lord Neil Mendoza on how he's doing that through the cultural recovery that he is overseeing for our government. Now, in this environment, shifting to digital revenue models can no longer be a pipe dream. It's essential for the cultural sector's revival. For UK arts institutions, donations from individuals are down 63%. Visitor numbers at some of our greatest arts institutions are down 85%. And swaths of theaters, music venues, and galleries are closing their doors permanently. Freelancers who make up half of the creative workforce can expect to see more than 250,000 roles terminated by the end of 2020. So faced with such uncertainty around the business models that many institutions have relied on for centuries, the need to adapt and innovate is more pressing than ever before. So what does the future have in store for the sector? How can organizations and individuals adapt their business models to fully harness digital platforms? What does the creative of the future look like? And what role can policymakers, tech companies, investors, and cultural institutions play in ensuring that the sector can innovate, adapt, and move forward in an increasingly disrupted world? Joining me to answer these questions are 4 leading voices from the worlds of arts, technology, finance, and policy. All offer unique perspectives on the current state of the cultural sector and what might be in store for those utilizing digital platforms for income generation. Kicking off with Kara Madoff-Barnett. She's a cultural powerhouse. I was introduced by Yana Peel to her years ago, and we were instant girlfriends. She is also a Tony Award-winning theater producer and a former senior executive at Lincoln Center. She's been the executive director of ABT, of the American Ballet Theater, one of the world's greatest dance companies, since 2016. Good morning. Hey.
Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Next up is Suhair Khan. Suhair is an expert on the interspace between technology and culture. Formerly head of Google projects for Google Arts and Culture, Suhair now leads on various strategic initiatives for Google, including a new sustainability platform for the global fashion industry, as well as serving on boards of numerous arts organizations. Good morning, Suhair. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Susan. Thank you.
Next up is Andrea Sullivan. She is the head of International Environment, Social, and Governance, as we all call it, ESG these days, at Bank of America, a banking behemoth that is one of the world's most significant arts funders. And I thank you, Andrea, and I thank Rena DeSisto out of New York. You guys are awesome. At the start of this year, the bank actually teamed up with Nesta and other partners, including the Arts Council, to create the world's largest impact investment fund for the creative arts. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And finally, joining this powerful cohort of women, we have Ed Vasey, now the Lord Vasey of Didcot. Ed was the Member of Parliament for Wantage for 14 years until 2019 and served as the government's Culture and Digital Minister from 2010 to 2016, becoming the longest serving minister in the role. Ed, thank you for all your service to our country, and thank you for being here this morning.
It's an honor to make the cut.
You made it all right. So thank you all so much for joining me, and now on to our questions. I promised Kara, because she's actually dialing from North Carolina at about 5 o'clock in the morning, I think it is for her, I wouldn't start with her, but this is to all of you. And what I wanted to ask is, you all have vast experience working with leaders in the arts and creative industries over the years. How have you seen the sector's models for income generation evolve? And how have organizations shifted towards monetizing digital platforms? Ed, can I hit you first on that one?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure, of course. So how have you seen the sector's models for income generation evolve over the years? And how have you seen organizations shift towards monetizing digital platforms?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm obviously behaving like it's 5 a.m. here, so I'll try and be more on it from now on, Susan. I think, to be blunt with you, Susan, I'm not sure it has evolved as much as I would have liked to have seen it evolve. I think that, I was the culture minister, but also the tech minister. So I had a feet in two very different camps. And my challenge to the world of culture was always to adopt the innovative thinking of the tech world. Now, people in tech can be extremely irritating and quite smug, but actually, I find at least that they are constantly thinking about how to upend traditional business models because of that thing we hold in our hand, the iPhone or the Samsung phone and the iPad, because they recognize that a lot of people live their life on screen, whereas the arts are very wedded, understandably, to live performance and audiences and gathering, the static museum display through to the live performance of music and ballet. And that is totally understandable, and I wouldn't want to undermine that. But I would like to see the arts try to reach out more digitally. Now, having said that, of course, every business and every aspect of our lives is digital, and that goes without saying. So, of course, you will now see museum exhibitions produce a video that people can watch. You'll see performing arts organizations have online performances or supporting material that supports the work that they do so that audiences can dive deeper. But there's still, I think, a long journey to using data in the way that businesses use data, and to really putting digital not as an afterthought, but very much alongside the bread and butter of live performance and static exhibitions. So, as I say, I think it would be impossible for arts organizations not to have somehow adopted digital, and a lot of museums, for example, have chief digital officers, but I'm not sure where they are in terms of actually having a meaningful revenue stream from digital in the way that many businesses, say a parallel business like media, now have been able to achieve.
Suhair, could I move over to you on that question?
Yeah, so hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Yeah, so for me, this is really exciting. I mean, I think obviously it's a horribly challenging moment for cultural institutions in terms of their existing business models, but it's also a social moment, a political moment where culture is actually being defined and redefined in the online space. We're already now living our lives online in so many ways, and I don't know how far we're going to go back. And so I think we're going to experience culture similarly. I think cultural institutions are starting to integrate into the story and thinking about how digital is not just something that they do on the side, but how it becomes more and more central to how they work, how art is created and presented. You're seeing a lot more, for example, mini concerts on social media, Instagram, for example. You see like mini operas taking place. You'll see a lot more YouTube content. You'll see a lot more kind of revenue generation from advertising on the websites of museums and cultural institutions, and of course partnerships, outside of the cultural sector, which you mentioned also briefly, Susan. So I think it's actually a moment where you suddenly have a global stage for a lot of cultural institutions that didn't have those audiences, and it's a time to lean into that and hopefully follow through with integrating digital into ways that cultural institutions work to eventually monetize in a way that's far more embedded than is currently the case.
Suhair, thanks for that. And I'm wondering if I can shift over to Cara now, because you guys are doing it in America, aren't you? And you did this very early on at ABT.
We're certainly trying. And I think that there's a big difference with institutions that have large libraries of archival content, performing arts organizations that have captured full-length performances in HD of everything that they've done for the past decade. And then those of us like ABT that thought, you know what, we'll get to that one day. Right now we're interested in the ephemeral and the live experience, and you had to be there. And now all of a sudden in this paradigm and in this context, it's okay, now it's a kick in the pants, right? Let's get going and let's create exciting digital content. And what we're doing at ABT, and I think at many other organizations that are creating compelling content, is we're getting into the test kitchen and we're inviting our artists in. So this isn't a time necessarily for the institution to step back and take time and create this grand strategy. I think it's time for testing and learning rapidly. And for us, the best ideas have been coming from our 90 dancers who are innovative and entrepreneurial, and we're partnering with them to nurture and to incubate their ideas and to help them find the right distribution platforms, the right brand partners, so that we can reach the widest possible audience, which is what we're called to do in our mission, is to bring the art form of ballet to the widest possible audience. Now we have the opportunity to do that, and we have what I call COVID cover to try things. And it's a very exciting time because we can create content that's not only artistically excellent, but that also is more human, more intimate. We can invite our viewers and our fans and our audiences into that test kitchen with us and show them the process and introduce them to what I call the superhumans, the artists who make this company the extraordinary institution that it is. But they really have to be our co-creators and our thought partners as we innovate.
The wonderful Leonardo exhibition that you sponsored, that the bank sponsored over at the Louvre, and how it wasn't just the exhibition, but there was the whole other VR experience happening with HTC. But can you speak to it as on behalf of the bank? Like, how are you seeing these models changing?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, as everyone said, digital was already here when the pandemic hit, but the pandemic has really accelerated the evolution for the cultural sector. We work with large theater organizations, as you know, some of which, like the NT, have done just as Cara suggested. They have broadcast some of the greatest material that we have in the UK out over YouTube. They had 20 million views. Now that was free, but it has propelled them into thinking about the potential commercial opportunity. And with the Abbey Theatre in Ireland, they actually created new material and put that out at a ticketed price over the digital. And that's been so successful that they have renewed the season. So I think there's light in the way that digital can help the business models of the cultural institutions. I looked at this question more holistically over time because I've been in this area working with the arts for 20 years for various companies. I think the partnership models have evolved. It's very important for the organizations and for their funders to have a mutually beneficial relationship where both parties build the model. So sharing ideas, sharing skills, talent. I think, the bank has offered HR help, marketing help, digital help through our tech employees for arts organizations, and the arts organizations themselves have been instrumental in coming into the buildings. Well, actually we've done it over virtual, and running courses on confidence, presence, and some of the real skills that these artists have that we could all use. And the other thing that I just want to say as far as evolution of business models is the arts organizations are increasingly looking to diverse pools of capital. They know they need to do that to support their growth. You've mentioned it, Susan, about philanthropy can't be the sole source of revenue. And they're using digital tools like crowdfunding. There are social investment funds and even developing endowment funds that has been supported through the Heritage Lottery Fund over the past years through a match. So I think everyone's trying to really push the boat out on creativity using digital where they can.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And on what you're talking around, the social investment, I just want to go over to Ed because Ed, I'd love it if you could touch on the Digital R&D Fund with Nesta that you helped set up with the Arts Council England. And when you set that up, what did you set out to achieve with that fund? And where do you feel like it is now? And what more can government be doing?
So it goes back really to my opening remarks, which were a little downbeat compared to the optimism and enthusiasm of the other panelists. That's the trouble of asking me to speak first. I would change my tone after those brilliant remarks that followed me. But the Digital Art Fund is exactly on point in terms of my opening remarks, because it was about me feeling very strongly that cultural organizations were not engaging with the world of tech, and I wanted to provide a sort of formal platform that meant that cultural organizations had to think hard about what tech could bring to their organization. So we set up a relatively small fund, and we did it with Nesta, which is it's got a huge endowment, Nesta, but it was set up by the government, the National Science and Technology in the Arts organization, and the Arts Council itself, which is the organization in the UK that funds a lot of arts organizations. And the idea was to do experiments with arts organizations about tech, and companies like Punch Drunk, Immersive Theatre Company, looked at virtual reality. Other companies looked at how you use social media and data. And there is a report out that was published in the sort of mid-2010s and some case studies. But as far as I'm aware, that hasn't really been followed through, which I find a bit disappointing. My dream, which again has not been realized, and maybe the wrong dream, was for the Arts Council to sort of have an arm which was a sort of a pool of best practice and development, so that any arts organization that wanted to say, you know, who are the interesting people we could talk to about doing X, Y, or Z in tech, would get introduced to both case studies and examples of best practice and good people to talk to. So it can potentially cover everything from the customer experience, the experience of the audience, through to you know, how you might enhance or differentiate the live experience, as I say, given that we all live on our screens. So that's what I tried to do. And Andrea will know as well that we also set up a social impact fund, thanks to the Bank of America, which again was about bringing a sort of business sensibility to the arts, in the sense of saying, you know, one of my great frustrations with a lot of arts organizations is a mentality of the mentality of philanthropy, which says, please give us money because we're very poor and need your help, rather than saying we're an extraordinary organization that if we had limited after our name or PLC after our name, you wouldn't think twice about investing in. So please invest in us, because you will get a return.
Well, we'll be hearing more from Cara about that soon, but I want to flip over to Suhair first, because you've got this wealth of knowledge, Suhair, and thank you so much for being here this morning. You've worked with an array of organizations and individuals at the intersection of really technology and arts through your work with Google Arts and Culture. And I'm curious, like, what digital tools do you see being used, whether those are by Google or by an array of different tech companies that can help generate revenue digitally? Like, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so to give everyone context, Google Arts and Culture, which you've mentioned, is actually not for profit. And it's interesting to think about how this online platform that helps to digitize the collections of museums or to bring archives online has now become central, obviously, to like how we're looking at the future of culture in the digital space. I think the most salient part of this is something that you've both alluded to, is that at the end of the day, these platforms are built by partnerships. And for me, museums are obviously these repositories of cultural content, but they're also basically think tanks. You know, they're hubs of ideas. Curators are obviously some of the smartest people any of us have met. I've worked with curators of the Serpentine, the V&A, Somerset House, and so on. And I don't think anything can replace that intellectual capital. And equally, you know, we've discussed earlier, if it's a dance company, it's the dancers or the performers. So I think that needs to be monetized in a different way in the online space going forward. And it's already happening, right? We're looking at a lot of live streams that have been taking place. You've seen YouTube used as a platform recently, where the English National Ballet, the Royal Philharmonic are doing YouTube live streams, and then they have a donate button on the page, or they're monetizing via ads. There's a call to action somewhere in the video. So there's already this using the platforms that are out there as a request for donation. But equally, in terms of how you partner with technology companies, other institutions, I think there's a huge gap there. I've worked very closely with, you know, organizations organizations like the National Gallery, who have their own head of digital, Chris Michaels. He's wonderful. He's helped to bring the Artemisia exhibition in the National Gallery onto Google Arts and Culture. So it's not to say that the online platform is being monetized, but there's a hybrid model where people are being encouraged to explore more stories, more content, more immersive technology online. And then those that can come to the museum in this weird world that we live in can then come. The quality of online content has improved. It's more immersive. You can put on merchandise, for example, on YouTube. You can sell things online now. So I think being more hybrid and approaching cultural content is a great opportunity, actually. And then in terms of what are the platforms out there, Apple has done an amazing augmented reality project on the streets of New York and London with artists like Chow Fei and Karsten Holler. Museums like the New Museum have participated in that. You just mentioned HTC. They've just done a VR experience for Alice in Wonderland for the V&A, which you can experience from the comfort of your home. Again, these don't necessarily need to make money in the short run, but they're bringing these two forms of intellectual capital together. They're leading to new creative conclusions. And equally, these tech companies or partners are paying for the actual work. They're providing the technologies, and there's probably room for that standard donate model in the future. And then finally, I would say, coming back to the creators, exactly this. Let the dancers monetize their own YouTube channels, their own Instagram channels. What about small scale donors? Why don't you have access to a curator for a fee? That old model may no longer exist. You may no longer have gala dinners at the Met, but allow people to come face to face with a curator and learn from them. For me, all of this stuff is happening again at a small scale. I know the London Design Biennale did a really cool Zoom kind of medal fundraising dinner a few weeks ago online, but leaning more, I think, into connecting people, the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of information. That's probably where we're going, rather than the wow of a one-off experience. And I hope that continues.
Suhair, thank you. And I feel like I want to turn over now to our voice of America, over to Kara. I mean, you've spoken previously about how this period forced this acceleration of changes that will be significant for the future of ABT. And Ed, I love that your pooch is in the room right now.
I know, she's just joined. The discussion is so compelling that she's pushed back the door to join.
Welcome. This is why I love this. Okay, what's the reality, Kara, on the kind of for cultural organizations in the US right now in terms of creating digitally driven revenue streams? And what support is available? Because as our audience knows, the funding models from between governments, and we'll get into this more later, but in the US, it's not the same. It's not the same. It over to you without becoming political.
No, it's okay. As Ed was describing the resources available to cultural organizations in the UK, I had those twangs of jealousy. But what Suhair was saying about the hybrid model is absolutely spot on. We are experimenting with many different ways to monetize our digital connections, our digital audience, our digital content. One area in which we've had tremendous success, and I know other organizations have as well, is in education. And that's been mentioned on this panel. There's this intellectual curiosity right now, and there's this strong desire to learn during this time of isolation. And so for us, while all of our traditional sources of earned revenue, or most of our sources of traditional earned revenue from ticket sales and touring fees are non-existent, completely gone, and that's 56% of our revenue pie in a normal year, our education revenues have stayed strong. We pivoted very rapidly to online courses. And what we found is that the audience and the customer base for excellence in dance education, with the most extraordinary faculty which we have available, and some of the incredible guest faculty that we now have available, because star dancers are popping into classes and teaching and coaching. There is tremendous desire for that type of learning. Also for our teacher training programs, which in the past, barriers to entry have been the cost of travel and the idea of coming to New York for an intensive multi-week program. Now that that's offered online, we have hundreds and then thousands in our summer intensive programs joining us from dozens of countries around the world. So real silver linings in the education space and training the next generation of artists, the next generation of ballet teachers. So that's been very exciting for us, is finding ways to tap into that desire for learning and to be able to monetize that as well. As far as philanthropy and how we are connecting with donors in the digital space, I find that the most important thing is constant contact. How can artists and arts organizations be the antidote for isolation? How can we tell stories? How can we connect in ways that are intimate and authentic with individuals who are feeling lonely? And how can we provide joy and uplift and transport them? And so we are doing that in hospitals. We are doing that through YouTube. We are doing that through social media, through any channel, and we're really experimenting and exploring with how we can reach individual donors. At the same time, I think that for brands, our arts organizations can be sources of compelling storytelling and video. And how can we bring these stories to life in ways that will touch hearts and that will spark an emotional response in this time when brands are seeking new ways to communicate that have more meaning. And can arts organizations partner in ways that will elevate and amplify brands and their stories at the same time that for us, we're reaching beyond, in our case, abt.org. If you come to my website, you already care about ballet. But if you come and are introduced to our artists through a brand and their larger reach and platform, that's a good thing for everyone.
Amazing. And maybe I'll ask some of the folks in the green room to flash up one of the videos to go to of the work that you guys are doing in New York. I think it's with Mount Sinai Hospital, where you're bringing in ballet and music virtually to the children's wing, which is just beautiful.
And that was an idea, Susan, that came from one of the members of our orchestra who said, can we do some live concerts for patients and hospital staff? And so many of our artists were inspired by that idea. And so we have been doing these live concerts for patients and doctors and nurses and hospital staff throughout this time.
That's the beauty of this place. I want to move over now to Andrea, who actually we learned in the kind of when we were putting this together, she's one of your funders, and you're proud to do this work with these guys. Aren't you working with the studio company, Andrea?
We are.
Yeah. So clearly, Andrea, supporting arts organizations is of paramount importance to the bank. And what does corporate investment in the S, so everyone knows ESG, environmental social governance, Andrea runs this at the bank. What does the S look like in practice? Because that seems to me the closest that ties into what you're doing within the S, that fits in with what you're doing within the arts. Is that kind of true?
Yeah, it's exactly true. The S for us is a really important part of how the bank runs itself and how we work in our communities. We have a long-term view of responsible growth for the bank, and we really know that the arts matter. They help create cultural understanding. They bring humanity, like Cara was saying. They educate and enrich societies, and they help economies to thrive. So our social commitment, as you call it, Susan, is really to our employees and to our communities. We want the bank to be a great place to work, and we work in partnership with our arts organizations to help make that happen. And, we're very committed to our communities. We're support over 2,000 arts organizations globally and have a program which runs from sponsorship to conservation. We do a lot of conservation work, 33 countries, 170 works globally. We also have education programs, and Cara, your story about what you're doing in the education space is fantastic. I mean, certainly in EMEA, which is where I am most of the time right now. The education piece is crucial to our relationship with our communities, but also to the longevity and importance of the arts in general. So we're learning partners with the National Theater. We're doing a lot of creative career work with them and Black, Asian, minority, ethnic young people, trying to help bring opportunities for careers and help to diversify the cultural sector in the long term. Susie, you mentioned the Louvre. You know, when we sponsored the Da Vinci exhibition, we brought over 800 young people to Paris, some of whom had never been to Paris, most of whom had never been to the Louvre. They were able to come into the Louvre on the quiet days, the Tuesdays, and experience Da Vinci in classes of 20. I am hoping that inspiration and that opportunity is something that will live with them for a long time and give them confidence to think about the world outside of just where they live. So, you know, the arts are really a bedrock of our environment, social, and governance view of what organizations should be doing to help create communities that can thrive. And, you know, even in the toughest times through 2008, 9, 10, and where we are now, that commitment has been unwavering. Then that need for mutual understanding right now never been more poignant. So I'm really pleased to say that we're here to stay.
I love, though, this whole continuum, though, that it's from that when you think of the S in ESG, the arts and culture and communities in which you serve, which the bank is in, you see that as an important component of that. And you guys have even put not just money to the arts institutions, but you've put it into these funds. And I want to learn more about this because your first fund was so successful that you launched another one right as we were going into COVID. I remember being there. Can you talk a little bit about the Arts Impact Fund and how does it support arts organizations in new and innovative ways?
Right. So actually, it was the government that came to us about 2015. Sure. Ed could tell us all about it. And they were starting to think about how do we fund the arts in a more diversified manner. And they came to us to help us think about that with them and to actually use our skills in structuring financial instruments to figure out the best way to do this. And in the end, we launched something called the Arts Impact Fund, which was the first fund of its kind, we believe, super innovative. And it's a structured fund with the Arts Council, Esme Fairbairn, Nesta, who we've heard Ed reference, and the bank. And it was a pilot fund of £7 million. And it was offering loans, not grants, unsecured loans to arts organizations who were asking for between £150,000 and £600,000. And the advantage is that the terms of that loan were rather flexible, the length of return on capital, as well as the interest rate. So what we were trying to do was find a midpoint where arts organizations, most of whom had never taken loan money, could figure out how they could make themselves more resilient through this structure. And we got in requests for loans from arts organizations of all types, including new business models wanting to use digital to reach more of an audience. And we also got in arts organizations from all over the country, which was one of our goals, not to make it too London-centric. And over the last 4 years, we made 30 investments at about £8.8 million. So some of the funding had started to come back and we reinvested it. Not all of the organizations were successful because of COVID. Some of them were hit pretty hard, but very few. And we were able to stretch the terms even further, give some holidays, help the recipients. And so that fund continues the repayment and the success of the impact. But I think what it showed was that, you know, most of the UK organizations have taken grants and they needed support along the way. Nesta is the fund manager. And they were fantastic in helping to build capacity in those organizations, helping them understand what return on investment is, but also helping them measure their social impact. And I think that was one of the surprising things for all of us, was the challenge in really being able to quantify that social impact. And I don't know, I think it was Ed, but it might have been someone else on the panel, apologies, but that data point and the use of data, as Suhaira, you might have said, I don't, is so important and will become more important, I think, now that we've got digital and there's more measurement. But how do you really know you're making an impact? And I think, you know, intrinsically, we all know if you go and see a ballet, that impact is immediate. And all the things that the arts do for health and beauty and creativity and innovation and all of that. But being able to measure that is really important. And so we're still working on models and we're working with the organizations. But the fund was so successful that now, you're right, Susan, we have launched a second fund with additional lenders as well. That is a £20 million fund. The loans will be slightly larger, 150 to $1 million, repayable over 10 years. And the same sort of support is still being offered. And, you know, to see these organizations learning this, building their resilience, reaching more people, or creating a new program in a community and building their operating models with greater resilience is fantastic. And I think we'll see more of this going forward, because the way the arts are funded needs more support.
Thank you, Andrea. Now, what I'm going to do is we're all listening to lots of webinars and have been doing so since this started. And one of the things that I always think at the end is I'd love 3 key takeaways from each of these folks that are speaking to us. So I'll go first, and then afterwards I'll call on the rest of our panelists as we come to a close. You know, I'm a board member of the Donmar Warehouse here in London and the Representation Project out in California. And I'm speaking to board members. I'm speaking about, you know, we should all be striving to do the following. You know, 1, expect your executive team to be engaging with digital technology in meaningful ways, and hold them to account when they don't. When they do propose ideas, be as supportive with digital experiments as you would be with new writing, new choreography, or other creativity driving loss leaders, and ensure budget is set aside to train and upskill the team and enable them to maximize experimentation. 2, consider what assets, including digital expertise, that you or those in your network might have access to, in addition to the financial support you could give. Partnership, it's key to success. We're hearing that from every one of the folks on our panel today. And 3rd, as a board member, leverage your learnings from the private sector and treat your nonprofit boards with the same diligence. Very few executives or directors of private companies would approve a strategy with no digital investment. And almost all private companies experiment with financing options, ranging from venture funding to debt, and with the understanding that this is an investment to help them scale. Why should your nonprofit board be significantly different? Keep the same hat on. I want to move over to Suhair. 3 takeaways for everybody.
So I don't want to repeat much that people are going to say. I'd say number 1, diversity. For me, all arts organizations around the world need to lean into diversity. And I don't just mean professional background, ethnic background, I also mean age. In order to be better at digital, we need more young people coming on board, engaging with the cultural sector in different ways, and they need to come from different aspects, different walks of life, different backgrounds, and they need to be integrated into the core of how cultural institutions work. So I think I'm seeing this on some of the boards that I sit on, is really this focus on diversity and making it real. At the end of the day, that's the only way there's going to be an evolution into digital, and it's also going to become more than a side project or a nice to have. And I think it's going to be a bit of a shock as the sector comes to terms with that. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. The second thing is being scrappy. A lot of cultural institutions around the world, for good reason, take care of extremely important artifacts and represent, often hundreds of years of culture. I think it's hard to step outside of process and to do things in a way that feels silly, using TikTok, setting up a YouTube creators channel, asking for donations online, renting out your space. I'm on the board for Wayne McGregor, and they have a beautiful dance space in East London and Stratford, and now they're renting it out outside of the cultural world. Be scrappy and sort of be open to doing things that you might not have been comfortable with, or that maybe your board wouldn't have been comfortable with a year ago, and see where it takes you. I think Kara talked about experimentation. This is the time to experiment and to be bold. And then we talked about partnerships. I think the biggest moment, the biggest advantage of this moment is this global audience, this connection across boundaries, across borders. Think about how other institutions are leaning into this hybrid model. I was just in Islamabad, and the National Council of the Arts is doing an outdoor film festival, socially distanced. They've never shown film before. I think it's a time to be playful and to build bridges. And of course, it's difficult, and I don't want to minimize that, but equally, there's a chance now to connect across this digital space.
Thank you. Kara, takeaways.
Okay, well, everything that you and Suhair said plus. So I would just say, again, to empower artist-led innovation, and to borrow a word from Suhair, the artists are scrappy. And how can we, as organizations, and Susan, you mentioned board members, how can we provide artists with encouragement, with mentorship, with training, with introductions, with investment, and with amplification of their wild and exciting ideas? Number two, be the antidote for loneliness. How can we over-communicate with our employees, our artists, our donors, our fans, our audiences? The uplift and optimism are in short supply in the world right now. And how can we deliver that? And how can we bring people together? In our traditional galas at the Metropolitan Opera House, the largest audience we could possibly have is 3,800 people. In our first ever online virtual gala called American Ballet Theater Together Tonight back in May, we had 75,000 viewers tune in. How can we, and this is my third point, how can we gather data from these experiences and these experiments and learn from it? In the military, it's called after action review. How, after each of these experiments, can we gather data on who is tuning in, how they're engaging, and then how can we use that information to do even more and to reach a wider audience in a more meaningful way and spark action and engagement. So as we look to our next big virtual online event on November 18th, how can we reach 750,000 people or more? And on the revenue side, we found that over 3/4 of the donors to that live event back in May were new people who we had no idea, we had never engaged with before. How can we keep that up and continue to grow the audience? And how can we continue to reach more individuals with these stories of uplift and humanity and joy?
That's great. That made the hair go up on the back of my neck when you said that you got all these new donors. That's fab. Andrea, 3 takeaways to our audience.
So I think some of the things everyone said, but I slightly different bent on it. I do think that we started off, I was talking about the evolution of partnerships. I think the relationship between corporate funders and the arts has moved tremendously in the last years. And I think, this is the moment to really seize on how those relationships can be truly mutually beneficial so that there can be more commercial support. And everyone wants the arts to succeed, no more so than now. So I would rethink and revisit some of your friends in that may have corporate funding. Diversified funding, I think we talked about that. It's crucial for sustainability. We see the world of philanthropy changing, governments are strapped. How can arts organizations think about a cross-subsidy model? I think Suhair mentioned some of the ways you could think about that, and also different types of large funding, so taking loans as well as grants. So, and then thirdly, Kara's point, which we said before, is that the data is key. Digital is a fantastic way to start being able to collect that data in a more economical way. But understanding your social impact, understanding how you can change loneliness. I mean, what a huge thing to say, but it's so true. And using that and leveraging that and getting the data around it will help tremendously and unlock other funds. So maybe there's health funds that, we need to be thinking about, and we are already, right? But using the arts to, really in a more formulaic way to help with health. So, yeah, I'd say those are the three things. I'd also like to say that the arts create really big thinkers, people that can think outside the box. And I'm honored to be on the platform today with some of them. And I think there needs to be more integration of those thinkers into some of the bigger issues that we're trying to solve for, like poverty and education and health and all the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The arts have a huge role to play in that, and we need to kind of make that a stronger, more connected link for us to get to where we need to be as a race.
Andrea, thank you so much for that, because it's so true. This all does feed into all of this that we're looking at as a planet. Ed, do you have one takeaway? Because they're saying to me, you got to end the session, Susan.
So unfair. I feel so brutally treated. Set up a development agency for the Arts Council that becomes a kind of commercial style consultancy that advises arts organizations, funded obviously by Suhair and Google, on digital tech stuff that they should be doing.
Okay.
One-stop shop, no messing about.
There we go. So listen, to all my speakers, thank you all so much. I need to make sure that everybody who's watching this knows that if you do have Q&A access through CogX, we're going to take a short 15-minute break. And then after that, we'll move into the Q&A where you'll have all the fabulous panelists here. And in closing, after this ends, you're going to watch a beautiful video that Kara gave us from ABT. You're going to be able to see their work, their principal dancers, and their studio company. Thank you all for joining us, audience, because it means you care. And I hope that you got some information this morning to make you feel jazzed to go out there and make some change. Take care and goodbye.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.